All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to my channel. It's an educational channel. I try to check into great theories, discoveries, and concepts that you wouldn't know otherwise because they've been suppressed outside of your purview unless you're willing to do a lot of digging. And they are things that are presented on this channel are of vital importance, and probably for that reason have been suppressed, but they could really help you out with your personal development in terms of your mental, spiritual, and physical health. And in particular, we are doing a series of Bible decodes. This is number 344. These are things that your pastor, priest, or rabbi are not telling you. Things that would possibly unlock a great amount of information concealed within the Bible, or an understanding of the greater context and true meaning of some of these documents. We've looked at a lot of different sources in all of these decodes, especially the Roman origins hypothesis, which states that the true authors of the New Testament were the Romans, the Caesars of the Flavian dynasty of Caesars from 89 to 96 AD. 69 to 96 AD. And they did this as part of a psychological operation against the Jews. And the operation was in no way meant to last for 2,000 years, but nobody seemed to really pick it up except for about 100 different authors who have written on the subject, but had to do so in general in hiding or hidden language. But in the 20th and 21st century, it has become more open. But these authors have also been suppressed. We've covered many of those authors: Joseph Atwill and Michael Menescotts and Abelard Reuchlin, Roman Piso, James Valiant, Cliff Carrington, and others. But we've also gone through many other ciphers to decode the New Testament in particular, but we'll be getting to the Old Testament soon enough. But this author kind of straddles both of them, and is talking about the Old Testament here. This is Thomas Paine, who was one of our founding fathers of the United States of America. His pamphlet, Common Sense, was seminal in getting toward the Declaration of Independence later on that year, 1776. And later on in his life, he wrote this book called The Age of Reason. And Thomas Paine was one of many American deists. Many of our founding fathers were deists, and the deists believe in one God. But that one God is not an author. That one God does not write books, and did not write the New Testament, the Old Testament, or the Quran, or any other book, but has endowed human beings with faculties of consciousness such as reason, intuition, and psychic powers that allow us to behold the creation and understand the Creator through the Creator's own works, which are of nature and not of books. And so Thomas Paine talks about a lot of that here in this work. And I believe that as truthers, we have to recognize that thinking that the Bible is the Word of God is not of truth. There is no evidence for that. You need evidence in order to be able to pursue truth. You can't just do it on faith. That's not truth. Faith is not. And there's a ton of evidence that actually cuts against that. And so for truthers to be looking at the Word of God, when they look at the Bible, is going against everything that you believe in. There needs to be some evidence, and there is only negative evidence. And so the book that you call the Bible needs to be read in the same way that you read all of the other documents from the 20th century and 21st century, with a very critical eye, and with an eye toward debunking it, and an eye of not taking it at face value, reading between the lines, decoding, and recognizing possible psychological operations. Okay, now, Thomas Paine was talking about, just got done talking about Isaiah and Jeremiah, two of the major prophets, and he pointed out that prophecy, he believes, is a misnomer in the Bible, and that they actually mean poetry, and by which he includes music as well. So we're going to start right here. The books called the prophecies are written in poetical language, but because there is no word in the Bible except it be the word prophet that describes what we mean by a poet. I have also said that the word signified a performer upon musical instruments, of which I have given some instances, such as that of a company of prophets, prophesying with psalteries, with tabrets, I'm not sure, with pipes, with harps, etc., and that Saul prophesied with them in 1 Samuel 10:5. It appears from this passage and from other parts in the book of Samuel that the word prophet was confined to signify poetry and music, for the person who was supposed to have a visionary insight into concealed things was not a prophet, but a seer. And let's see, I guess this is a footnote here that I'm going to kind of skip over. It's quite long. Please hold for processing. Sorry. It looks like there might be something to this footnote, however. So let me scroll back up and see what it says here. According to the modern meaning of the word, oh, well, no, okay. It was not till after the word seer went out of use, which most probably was when Saul banished those he called wizards, that the profession of the seer, or the art of seeing, became incorporated into the word prophet. According to the modern meaning of the word prophet in prophecy, it signifies foretelling events to a great distance of time, and it became necessary to the inventors of the gospel to give it this latitude of meaning in order to apply or to stretch what they call the prophecies of the Old Testament to the times of the New. But according to the Old Testament, the prophesying of the seer and afterwards of the prophet, so far as the meaning of the word seer was incorporated into that of the prophet, had reference only to things of the time then passing or very closely connected with it, such as the event of a battle that they were going to engage in, or of a journey, or of any enterprise they were going to undertake, or of any circumstance then pending, of any difficulty, or of any difficulty they were then in. All of which had immediate references to themselves, the case already being mentioned of Ahaz and Isaiah with respect to the expression, "Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son," and not to any distant future time. It was that kind of prophesying that corresponds to what we call fortune telling, such as casting nativities, predicting riches, fortunate or unfortunate marriages, conjuring for lost goods, etc. And it is the fraud of the Christian church, not that of the Jews, and the ignorance of the superstition of modern, that not that of ancient times, that elevated those. I know not what is the Hebrew word that corresponds to the word seer in English, but I observe it is translated into French by le voyant, from the verb voir, to see, and which means the person who sees, or the seer. The Hebrew word for seer in 1 Samuel 9, transliterated, is chose, C-H-O, is Jose, C-H-O-Z-E-H. The gazer is translated in Isaiah 47:13, the stargazers. Okay, so more on the seer's poetical, musical conjuring, dreaming, strolling gentry into the rank they have since had. But besides this general character of all the prophets, they had also a particular character. They were in parties. They prophesied for or against, according to the party they were with. As the poetical and political writers of the present day write in defense of the party they associate with against the other. After the Jews were divided into two nations, that of Judah and that of Israel, each party had its prophets, who abused and accused each other of being false prophets, lying prophets, impostors, etc. The prophets of the party of Judah prophesied against the prophets of the party of Israel, and those of the party of Israel against those of Judah. This party prophesying showed itself immediately on the separation under the first two rival kings, Rehoboam and Jeroboam. The prophet that cursed or prophesied against the altar that Jeroboam had built in Bethel was of the party of Judah, where Rehoboam was king, and he was waylaid on his return home by a prophet of the party of Israel, who said unto him in 1 Kings 13, Art thou the man of God that came from Judah? And he said, I am. Then the prophet of the party of Israel said to him, I am a prophet also, as thou art, signifying of Judah. And an angel spake unto me by the word of the Lord, saying, Bring him back with thee unto thine house, that he may eat bread and drink water. But, says the 18th verse, he lied unto him. The event, however, according to this story, is that the prophet of Judah never got back to Judah, for he was found dead on the road by the contrivance of the prophet of Israel, who no doubt was called a true prophet by his own party, and the prophet of Judah a lying prophet. In 2 Kings 3, a story is related of prophesying or conjuring that shows in several particulars the character of the prophet Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, the character of a prophet. Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, and Joram, king of Israel, had for a while ceased their party animosity and entered into an alliance, and these two, together with the king of Edom, engaged in a war against the king of Moab. After uniting and marching their armies, the story says they were in great distress for water, upon which Jehoshaphat said, Is there not here a prophet of the Lord, that we may inquire of the Lord by him? And one of the servants of the king of Israel said, Here is Elisha of the party of Judah. And Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, said, The word of the Lord is with him. The story then says that these three kings went down to Elisha. And when Elisha saw the king of Israel, he said unto him, What have I to do with thee? Because he was from Judah. Get thee to the prophets of thy father and the prophets of thy mother. Nay, but, said the king of Israel, the Lord hath called these three kings together to deliver them into the hands of the king of Moab. Meaning because of the distress they were in for water. Upon which Elisha said, As the Lord of hosts liveth before whom I stand, surely Were it not that I regard the presence of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, I would not look toward thee, nor see thee. Here is all the venom and vulgarity of a party prophet. We are now to see the performance or manner of prophecy. In verse 15, bring me, said Elisha, a minstrel. And it came to pass, when the minstrel played, that the hand of the Lord came upon him. Here is the farce of the conjurer. Now for the prophecy, and Elisha said, singing most probably to the tune he was playing, thus saith the Lord, make this valley full of ditches, which was just telling them what every countryman could have told them without either fiddle or farce, that the way to get water was to dig for it. But as every conjurer is not famous alike for the same thing, so neither were those prophets. For though all of them, at least those I have spoken of, were famous for lying, some of them excelled in cursing. Elisha, whom I've just mentioned, was the chief in the branch of prophecy. It was he that cursed the 42 children in the name of the Lord, whom the 2 she-bears came and devoured. We are to suppose that those children were of the party of Israel. But as those who will curse will lie, there is just as much credit to be given to this story of Elisha's 2 she-bears as there is to that of the dragon of Wantley, of whom it is said, poor children 3 devoured he, that could not with him grapple, and at one sup he ate them up, as a man would eat an apple. There was another description of men called prophets that amused themselves with dreams and visions, but whether by night or by day we know not. These, if they were not quite harmless, were but little mischievous. Of this class are Ezekiel and Daniel, and the first question upon these books, as upon all the others, is, are they genuine? That is, were they written by Ezekiel and Daniel? Of this there is no proof, but so far as my own opinion goes, I am more inclined to believe they were than that they were not. My reasons for this opinion are as follows. First, because those books do not contain internal evidence to prove that they were not written by Ezekiel and Daniel, as the books ascribed to Moses, Joshua, Samuel, etc., prove that they were not written by Moses, Joshua, and Samuel. Secondly, because they were not written till after the Babylonish captivity began. There is good reason to believe that not any book in the Bible was written before that period. At least it is provable from the books themselves, as I've already shown, that they were not written till after the commencement of the Jewish monarchy. Thirdly, because the manner in which the books ascribed to Ezekiel and Daniel are written agrees with the condition these men were in at the time of writing them. Had the numerous commentators and priests who have foolishly employed or wasted their time in pretending to expound and unriddle those books been carried into captivity as Ezekiel and Daniel were, it would greatly have improved their intellects in comprehending the reason for this mode of writing, and have saved them the trouble of racking their invention as they have done to no purpose, for they would have found that themselves would be obliged to write whatever they had to write respecting their own affairs, or those of their friends, or of their country, in a concealed manner, as those men have done. These 2 books differ from all the rest, for it is only these that are filled with accounts of dreams and visions, and this difference arose from the situation the writers were in as prisoners of war or prisoners of state in a foreign country, which obliged them to convey even the most trifling information to each other, and all their political projects or opinions in obscure and metaphorical terms. They pretend to have dreamed dreams and seen visions, because it was unsafe for them to speak facts or plain language. We ought, however, to suppose that the persons to whom they wrote understood what they meant, and that it was not intended anybody else should. But these busy commentators and priests have been puzzling their wits to find out what it was not intended they should know, and with which they have nothing to do. Ezekiel and Daniel were carried prisoners to Babylon under the first captivity in the time of Jehoiakim, 9 years before the second captivity, in the time of Zedekiah. The Jews were then still numerous and had considerable force at Jerusalem, and as it is natural to suppose that men in the situation of Ezekiel and Daniel would be meditating the recovery of their country and their own deliverance, it is reasonable to suppose that the accounts of dreams and visions with which these books are filled are no other than a disguised mode of correspondence to facilitate those objects. It served them as a cipher or secret alphabet. If they are not this, they are tales, reveries, and nonsense, or at least a fanciful way of wearing off the wearisomeness of captivity. But the presumption is they are the former. Okay, we're going to, that was kind of his explanation of Ezekiel and Daniel, or their his argument why they are authentic books, meaning that they were written by the actual people that they are said they're written by, which differs from many of the other books of the Old Testament. But tomorrow we'll get into his talking about the actual content of the book of Ezekiel and what he has to say about that. For now, we are going to leave you. And so please like, share, subscribe, and comment as you see fit. And please come back tomorrow. We'll learn a little bit more about the book of Ezekiel from Thomas Paine's Age of Reason. Thanks for tuning in today. Have a great day.